These are the massive megalithic stones in Baalbek in Lebanon. You can see the man standing here at the bottom and the size of these stones that he's touching. But look at the size of the megalithic stones above him and how they're beveled and set in so nice. And then the ones above that, they're so huge. These marbles that we see in megalithic stonework are just one key to the fact that what we perhaps are alluded to believing in school and academia itself and the constrictions there are show you things that try to get you to believe a certain directive whenever your mind, whenever you start to look at these things, shows you something completely different and an oddity, a twisting. How could somebody build something like this? And the fact that the stones aren't really in symmetry with each other, it's quite a unique thing when you see pieces like this inset for apparently no reason. If you can make this straight line here, why would you go through the trouble of having this much differential on this stone to not have them match? Why would you have this stone not the height of this stone? Why would you go through the trouble of making an inset that perfectly sets inside of that is worth more than the trouble of making this out of the right size of rock in the first place? It boggles the mind. And then you see things like this, where clearly the wall over here is made, that's in the edging here, is made by more modern people, just kind of stuck together with a muddish type concrete and rocks, not even faced out well, not even well done. And then you look over here and you see things like these rocks and the way they must have been inset. The logic that baffles you here is that you look at something like this straight line, and it seems like they know how to make things that are even not even the right size back into a straight line. Okay? So why would they make things look like Tetris then? I mean, is it just because they can? And if it's just because they can, these people are wasting to do this wall in square cubit bricks versus what they've done here must take at least 10 times the amount of time. And this is not an isolated event in any way, shape, or form. Over here around the corner, it actually shows you ones that are bent around corners in different levels. And sure, this laka block holds together for earthquakes and things, but are these people that advanced that they're building giant heavyweight buildings that are made to do this? Do we see a precursor to this anywhere? Or is this just some type of Tetris anomaly they have? Clearly, we've lost something. And, there's ancient stories about Atlantis and ancient cultures that had come from places unknown to bring society, civilization, and knowledge to people. These are depicted from the ancient Sumerians all the way through. We find tombs like this that just can't be explained due to modern technique and working. And yet back then these people were copper coming into Bronze Age perhaps at best. And even if you give them stone tools, you can't see somebody pulling off something that looks this intricate, gorgeous, flattened, and so on. And quite often we find these places that seem to be stairways that just seem to go to nowhere. It's a stairway to heaven that leads to a place that used to be there, but it's no longer there. The Nazca lines that you see, and you can only see them from space, look like runways and spaceships and animals and creatures. But let me tell you from first-hand experience, whenever you're there on the ground, you can't even see them. They're made for somebody that must have been up in the air flying over them to be able to see them, because when you go out to see them, it's not that neat. They want you to go around and help scuff new ones out, or not new ones, but redo the ones that had been there before. You can walk on the lines with them, and it helps to refresh them. And they do it to certain ones. Why would somebody build this? What is the complex idea in between? If you can make this rock flat, and you can make this rock flat, and you can make this cut in here, why would you do this and bevel something off just like this and cut in I don't see the extra cut that cuts in past that, like a radial cut, and then this, and then why would you make this piece right here is more difficult than this piece. This piece has to be a rod that's not much thicker around than your finger. It's 3 feet long. I don't know if it breaks inside the wall anywhere, but you think with all the pain in the ass these people went through, it wouldn't be. You can't stick a credit card between these things. It baffles the mind on how and why they would build something along that nature. You find things like this in structures where you know that this has been man-made. Now, perhaps it's been manipulated. Perhaps there was already a wallow or a swell there that they knew that collected water, and so they would end up terracing it out like this. But this is clearly something that's been totally man-manipulated, and for a reason once long, long gone. It's not an amphitheater. It's not a common growing terrace in any way, shape, or form. Something that just doesn't make much sense. Logic. You find people standing in front of stones like this that we're supposed to believe that they just take a little flat rock, a round boulder, and beat the thing out of the walls with all their buddies. And if they beat them out of the walls, then they flatten it off, and they really make it real flat on one side and on the bottom. But then the rest of the edges, they don't give a crap about. It's just willy-nilly silly, right? And then they don't even have a way to transport something that weighs this amount of tonnage. I mean, we're looking at, over 1,000 tons simple. And how do people even possibly get this here from where it was quarried at? Just doesn't make any sense. And then why would you go through the trouble that this rock is so cool that we're going to keep it like that, and then we're going to come on top of it with ones that are 1/3 that size, rather than all build out of stuff that's 1/3 that size. We're going to come over the top of it with all these other ones and zigzaggy fit them in, and after a couple of levels up, it'll all flatten up on top. It doesn't make much common sense. You find things like this on this one where you can see that radial cut that comes down at an angle right there, and that radial cut that goes through, I mean, it looks like it's been shaved, literally, and here it's not. And odd anomalies like that, these dents that are in there that look like they were for prying and pry bar type situations and stuff. And people just sit around and ogle these things. You look at stuff that looks like this, and it makes you wonder. Now, here's the complex mind just, geeking on something like this. If they can build them all exactly 11 inches tall, every single one of these rocks on this whole wall is exactly 11 inches tall, okay? They're flat and square, but yet the length, like this ways on each one of them, only 1 out of 6 of them is the same size within an inch. And they're not uniformly perfect either, but only 1 in 6 of them is uniform like that. The rest of them are willy-nilly crazy, from ones that are only 4.5, 5 inches long, wide at the most, to things like this that are 26 inches long. And it just doesn't make any sense at all why you would go haphazard. If you could build them all to be the same height, the same width and breadth, why would you make the length something that wasn't quite the same? And then to break it into a pattern that does look kind of like bricks where they're sitting on each other, but there's a lot that just come out not right. And they're willing to go with that, rather than to pick one for here that would not leave that cracking on a crack on a crack. But yet they don't seem to mind that. So there doesn't seem to be an idea to freshen this whole thing up to a correctness. And this whole wall is 3 foot thick. But then look at this one piece. If they can build them that big and that flat, which I'm sure is a little harder than these, then why don't they build all these this size, and then only build the different size ones to cut corners like this, like you're supposed to. It, again, baffling monolithic structures. So you look at things like this, and of course the Sphinx, and it's been rebuilt and eroded, and all these things seem to point towards celestial events, stars. They line up. There's alignments. Clearly we understand today that there are a huge amount of alignments between all of these sacred type buildings. Quite often they point towards Orion, and indeed you can see that there is Orion's belt that they had names for them in India, or in American Indian, that I will not try to speak. But then you have the pyramids here, Menkaure, Khafre, and Cheops, the Great Pyramids, which line out and offset and in brilliance and in size, kind of change that. Now, at one time, they were different colors too. They're red pyramids, and there's black pyramids, and the white pyramid, and so on. But the three great pyramids of Tehutihuacan, Quetzalcoatl, the pyramid of the sun, and the temple of the moon, or pyramid of the moon, are offset in this exact same manner. And you know, looking at like the videos we were looking at before, you have things that show you that they have the same knowledge base. They have the same knowledge concept as the Sumerians. And how would you get that same knowledge concept? Indeed, it passes all around the world. And it sounds almost biblical whenever you say everybody in the world, everybody in the nations had the same language. And that was meant to sound like maybe all the people that are around between Canaan and Samaria, right? Those people that had that language. Till you start to get through archaeology and stuff and you find things like this. Indeed, this is a star chart here too. And so the anomalies that abound whenever you start looking at things like this and their representations start to, you know, make you just wonder where it all comes from. Now, even closer to modern times than that, things are built on things. And if you'll look, this back wall here is again built with a perfectly flattened square, but yet misshapen blocks where two of them really aren't the same size at all as each other. It doesn't make much sense. So this is like in a mosque type thing, and they've cut in this, you know, cornice here on the edge that has like triple or quadruple and an inset and an undercut. If you look at it up here, right? Trenches, rivulets run all the way around it, cutting in these fancy cuts all around it and all their meanings and everything off of it, which just blows you away. But look right here, there's a swastika. And you can find those all the way back through caveman times. Swastika is back, it's put on mammoth bones and things. You find the Star of David here. You find them at Baalbek. You find them at a lot of places that don't have anything to do with Jewish people whatsoever. In fact, most of them don't have to do with Jewish people. There's another one that's down here in these temples. And, you know, to go through the trouble of making a sunflower and the bead that's there and the stars and the way they were depicted in old, you know, Sumerian tablets and things like that. So you look at something like this, and here's a giant gold seal that they have found that is made out of one solid piece of hammered out gold, and it has some very conspicuous symbolism that's on it. And people have come up with a bunch of weird ideas. I'm going to bounce a couple off of you here. These two people that are meeting right here, their outfits and their guise just doesn't look right, and people say this is possibly spacemen, something like that. I don't know if it looks like it to you, but this guy does look like somebody from the Middle East, and he even looks like he's got a beard on. Perhaps he's looking down at the ground slightly. You see this guy here, he's wearing a whole cape and a cowling and things, and that doesn't look like the Inca or the Maya people's normal clothing either, which is strange. People say a lot of things about these, but these beads that are on here, these counting beads, this is Sumerian. It comes from Sumerian bas-relief cylinder seals that they have that they roll out and they make impressions on things. Now in this depiction here, there's a cross of stars. There's this thing that conspicuously looks like the shape of South America with a line that would dash over and would hit somewhere around the Mediterranean. There's a creature that looks like a dragon, even has a tail that sticks off the edge of the frame, and he appears to be vomiting out stars. I don't know if there's any significance to 3 or 4 of them together in one and then one separate. This just looks like a pile of boulders, but then again, if you think about the architecture we were looking at a minute ago, this looks like that type of architecture pillowing in, and what they're all standing on here looks like brickwork that's constant, right? So, you know, a different depiction here. Now, look at this. This looks like it could be a few things to a few different people. And many people have tried to make conjectures as to what this could be, perhaps. And I think what we're looking at here is something that looks like the sun, and or a sun going over the mountains. And if you look, there's some mountains right here, right? There's 3 mountains, and the sun sets over the mountains. And so it's the sacred mountain that they have. And other people say, well, here what we have is the earth, and then we have the sky, and then into space. Okay, so you can get something weird out of that. There's this line that runs through it. So I guess this may be the line that we're supposed to be going on. Now this conspicuously looks like just a big blurb or a stand-up. People say this is supposed to mimic the Milky Way. And so this too is a bunch of stars, right? And they have two lines leading to this, showing in, which looks almost like a shotgun shot or a buckshot, and another star. Is this like a comet that's falling, that's breaking into pieces and had landed on the earth? Is this depiction we're seeing something about, where that's at in the sky at that point? You see things up here at the top, and there's four stars together, one in the center. This is a line of three, though, and the two shoulders, and this could easily be Orion. This is very much an egg shape or almost a loaf. People say this is the sun, and I can see that. I can see that's the sun, but then what is that? If that's the sun, then what is that? And if we're just looking at bright stars, then what's that? That looks as bright as the other stars that are shown in the other places. It's out here loose. And this is somewhat egg-shaped, but people say, well, that's the sun over here, and this is the moon. And I can see that, but then when people decipher it, they try to say that it's not. And of course, I see the crescent moon right here. And so what is this, big piece of bread here a symbol of? Was there at one time somebody's etching on there and it's been rubbed off, or things like that, So this is in Cuzco, by the way, and they still have it to this day. And people have come up with all these different ideas that they have for it, that it's the sun star, and this is all about an exoplanet and the journey it makes, and the seven dots are the Pleiades. Taurus could be the cross that's in the center of it, and up at the top they always talk about Orion with the three stars that are mixed in. And I can see the correlation of that. I don't really agree with the Taurus symbol necessarily so much. You'd have to add a couple of stars in, and indeed whenever they do add this here. But then if they're showing Taurus, why don't they show the stars that are up here that actually make the head of Taurus and actually make the horns, where you would discern it as not being a box, but then it's a box with a head on it with horns, and you could have a animal that would be Taurus. So they talk about, this being the visitor, this is the people of Earth, South America leading over. They're calling this a puma, and it entirely could be. There's a flower of life that's over here. There's another star, and they call it World of the Gods, and this is the sun of the gods, and this would be just the sun then. There's a mystery star that has to do with Earth that's close. They call that wiggle there the Milky Way again. So you see all these odd depictions, and Orion has Betelgeuse and so on. But whenever you look at something like this, again, here's the tree of life, and this jackal thing that they've got, either he's got 5 elongated tongues sticking out of his mouth, or he's vomiting out stars. So this could be the primordial idea of like the spilling out of brand new stars that makes the Milky Way. The odd pile of rocks that's here, just stands out. This almost looks like somebody should be standing down here with a blurb over them and they're talking, and this is where the words go when they're talking. 7 dots. So I'm going to show you something about all of this here in a second. The 7 dots and how it all works out together, and how this correlates to where there could still be Sumerians in there, right? Because they talk about Viracocha and Quetzalcoatl and these gods that had brought this ancient stuff before, and then whenever you find a depiction of him, he actually looks like this, and indeed that almost looks Christ-like, and you can see that there's a beard on this man. This was found with it, and this is indeed also the symbol of the sun, and the Son of God, and the Son of Man, and so on, right? Symbolism all around the edge here, and I really like to get a good look at that. But apparently it's a seasonal thing that goes around, right? And again, right here is that Orion setup, if you look at it. 1, 2, 3. Hopefully you can see that without me keep covering it up like that. But odd depiction here, and it just doesn't seem, well, it does seem like too coincidental. too much a coincidence, too much for something to be done like this. And you look at this plate here and this Orion symbolism. Let me show you what I've got with that. Now this is the sign of the Southern Cross, or crux, and it's a constellation which makes almost a perfect cross. It seems to be slightly leaning, and pivots through the sky, at night and everything. Well, this is a symbolism that's been around for a long, long, long time, when people had figured out the seasons and how far the sun goes at its maximum and its equinoxes and things like that. And so the symbolism that's known here is the sun, our sun, gets lower and lower in the sky about 1 degree. Ironically, the 360 degrees that the Sumerians gave us allow 1 degree per day that it starts to go south on us, and as it goes down south, it goes 1 degree per day, and as it reaches the sign of the Southern Cross here, it reaches its lowest point. Now it does so on December 21st, and whenever it does, it doesn't start moving back up for about 3 days. There's a pivot or a wobble that's in between there, and then it begins to rise again and start coming out of winter and back into summer, saving all mankind and allowing spring and the rebirth of life. And so what people would say is that the Son of God was hung on the cross and died. 3 days later, he's resurrected to save all of mankind. So you can see symbolism like that trapped inside of things that are very much in different realms of earth, and not just the Catholic or Christian one that we know of. Here's one of these Sumerian cylinder seals that we were talking about. And if you look, they've got different representations and weird things. Now this man here has a scorpion tail on him. Before I go any farther, I want to mention something. These come in different sizes. They come from something almost the size of a bowling pin. Or not a bowling pin, whatever you call them, the bread rolling pin that we use, and stuff. Something that's, 2.5 inches around, all the way down to just maybe finger to hot dog size ones, all the way down to ivory ones like this here that's been cut out, that the thing is not much more bigger around than a pen that you would write with, or a cigarette, right? And they roll them across clay, and whenever they do, because they're cut into this rock, when it rolls out, it puts a 3D picture out this side. And so you look at something like this, and here's what I was showing you before, is there's that diamond symbol, kind of the eye in the sky watching you. Here's that flying creature, and then above it is those 7 dots again, that are just like the 7 dots that you see in the other place. This is a symbol of a god, like the sun. They show the moon here, okay? So there's a lot of different sizes or weird ones that they have like this that stand out, and the Sumerian reliefs like this can be gone on for a long time and have their own video. I've got a couple on them. But continually we go over and over these motifs here, where you see something like a god here. Now this is supposed to be your lightning god, and you can see him holding his lightning bolts, right? So this is Jupiter. These are the planets, and they're all hanging out together doing their thing. It's like a comet streaking across the sky. You see him symbolically standing on the animal, meaning he's in place or he's in position. There's a tree of life here, but then you look at the flying thing that's up here, right? And then what it looked like the dragon was spitting out here, and these men are holding on to the plant that's there, and they're holding on symbolically to this, or getting from space or whatever this creature is here, some flying creature. They're going to get more of this tree of life, or things that go with the tree of life, or what you can seed this with that will make it genetically better. I'm not sure, but there's odd things in here. And here's a beautiful cow horn headset that's just set in, and so you see all that. But again, point being, 7 dots again in that same configuration. Jewel inset eye, turned on its side this time, or up and down, and of course the moon at the top. Quite often when you see these depictions, you'll see people dressed oddly. You'll see, the chair actually sitting onto an animal, things along this nature. Here I want to point out that we have Orion, 1, 2, and an offset third. So that's unmistakable. And also there is the 7 dots that are mixed there. That 7 dots has a lot of connotations to it in symbology. I think it really goes with all the 7 planetary objects that the people normally see. It's the 5 planets that you can see, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then also you would count as the other 2 the sun and the moon, which are about the same size in the sky and predominant in each one, and you end up with 7. Other people also say from the outside coming in, not from us counting from the sun out, but from other people coming to our solar system, it would be the 7th planet Eden, coming from Pluto through Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and then Earth would be the 7th planet in. You can see this guy here that's wearing some type of mask that looks like perhaps a lion outfit that he's wearing. And in different depictions, they're wearing different outfits. You see the hands that are in these gestures. And indeed, this gesture here is the gesture of talking or speaking. And whenever you see them doing this thing, they're speaking to each other, or imparting knowledge, or talking back and forth. And this is the goddess. And indeed, one tablet that stood out over a long time for everybody is this, where Lord Enki here, back whenever he was the Lord before Enlil had taken over, and he imparts the plow, which is what this is, to mankind via the priest that's right here. Now, oddities in this picture, of course, are this little weird thing here. Looks like a little rocket ship or something off on the side. Well, that's a time dripping container. You fill it full of water and it drip, 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 drips and counts time and sweats. And so there's also all these sacred mountains that are here, ibis, so on. But then up here, the big star of the show is the sun is the center of the whole solar system here. And if we do decide to count the moon as a planet, this has got everybody mixed into it. And then it's got one more small one that we don't count today. Perhaps they know about something more. Everybody talks about it being Nibiru, but what they don't fail to mention is that the asteroid belt is there from a planet that's missing now, and that could have something definitely to do with it. And if you're looking for a planet that would be Nibiru, something that's way out that occasionally comes in, look in front of his nose and you see that dot there? That also is the same size dot as that dot, that dot, that dot, that dot, and that dot. So could that not be something that's out there more at a distance than we normally are, willing to give credit for, or credit for these people to knowing? And so again, we start to look at these artifacts and what they mean and their connotations, and there's indeed some type of oddity that goes on here that makes a lot of sense if you look at it in one way, and no sense at all if you don't look at it in that way. And the Son of God that saves us all is that sun that's there. You see the sun symbolism here. You see Orion and how it somehow leads into this egg shape that holds everything. There's the Southern Cross that's there. And in here you can look and see these people here, and that depiction of a round earth that has 2 atmospheres above it. One is the top of the clouds and the other is into space. Or is it maybe a rainbow that you're seeing during a sunset, or just a depiction of a sunset, and that you have to go 7 sunsets in a certain direction, and that direction is delineated by the line that's shown? A lot of questions, more questions than answers, but some of these lead in a certain direction of thought. It all seems to go together when you start to look at all these other megalithic sites and some of the knowledge that's contained in between. And somehow, strangely enough, you'll find in these ancient artifacts here in Cuzco, Peru, that match up to a bunch of symbolism that used to be in the ancient Sumerians some 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.